Hey, good morning. It's Sunday morning, the day before winter break is over for, I guess, for the bulk of you. I hope that you enjoyed it. If I'm not mistaken, I never look at calendars, I have to be honest. If I'm not mistaken, the I'm presuming Malloy has a break too. Maybe it was the same time, or maybe it was uh, this week. I know a lot of colleges for some reason have it the week after the K-12 world does. In any case, here I am. I certainly haven't taken a lot of time off of the I was distracted by a few personal things here and there. Uh, the only thing I have put up in the past week or so, quite frankly, and haven't particularly looked at very closely, in truth, is the one discussion question I posted. I will post another one tomorrow, although I'm really not sure which one I want to post yet. And if I don't know which one I want to post, I may very well not post it. I mean, just have a posting just for the sake of having a posting is kind of silly, but more likely than not, I'll think of something maybe by the end of this video. You're going to see that this is Sunday. It's about 11:40, almost 11:40 in the morning. I have two videos planned, and I'll probably repeat myself in each of the videos uh, to some extent, as I am going to do right now. So, in other words, what I wanted to say was that this particular video is an attempt to do two things. One is to the primary reason for I'm doing for this particular video is to wrap up the last synchronous meeting that we had. We didn't quite get to the end, and that was bothering me a little bit because we had some interruptions, and we I thought needed to get to the content expectations at the very end of the agenda. I will tell you that I have another agenda a brewing. I haven't posted it yet because I'm actually quite frankly trying to simplify it. I think I have too many things in these agendas, and I want to give you more time to talk to me and to each other than to just listen to me say things at you, which is what I'm doing now. One of the reasons why I'm doing this video, so I won't take up time during a live session. So, if you recall, if you looked at you haven't seen the newest agenda, which is March, I think 25th or 15th. I forget which day it is. Don't hold me to that. I haven't looked. All right. Uh, I will look and let you know, and I will look and let you know. And I just remembered something else I have to announce, which I will put up in a separate announcement. I checked with Dr. Smith about intern hours. I was a little bit off on that, so I wanted you to hear me on this. What I was preparing myself to do, I actually had started a memo to all of you about, was to allot X number of hours per assignment. And I'm glad that I didn't post it yet, because when I talked to Dr. Smith, my boss, and a very helpful one, uh, it turned out that uh, the powers that be, before I became a professor here, had determined X number of hours per the course content. And this particular course, 5702, has been allotted 10 hours. Hear that, 10 hours. And so I'm going to give you a sign off on 10 hours for you. Now, rather than try to get very fine with this, 2 hours for discussion questions, 2 hours for this, I just flat out decided that I'm going to allot 5 hours for the upcoming assignment. I believe that's due March 5th. That's the policy preparation assignment. It's in so many words. I'm going to do more discussion about that in another video in a little while. So 5 hours for that, and 5 hours for the actual policy presentation that you're going to make, and I think it's April 18th, the last day of the class. So that's your 10 hours. 5 hours for the policy brief, the end of the semester assignment. 5 hours for the assignment for the assignment that is due on March 5th. So I'll sign off on those when you finish each of those assignments. So, for example, as of March 5th, I can presumably sign off on those 5 hours. So, but I'm going to make an announcement of that too, so everybody will see it in more than one place. I'm glad I remembered that. Okay, now I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint that you have already. I've talked about it more than once. It's that futuring PowerPoint. And I've given you the basis for it. I've given you some background context to it. And you have it in on Canvas in a module. I don't remember which one it is, but it says FBCL, or Futures-Based Change Leadership. It's based on one of my books, and it's a nice supplement to the book, although I think the book is cleaner and clearer than the PowerPoint to some extent. But it'll suffice if you mean to get that book on your own. You won't regret it, but it doesn't mean like you have to have it. It's not a requirement in any way at all. So much to say about that. So what I wanted to do is give you some things, see how some of these futuring things will work for this policy brief that you're going to be prepare. Knowing some of you have already begun it. And I want to catch you before you get too deeply into it, is because you may want to use some of these tools to learn to embed those kinds of practices into your budding leadership practices. Fair enough to say that, I assume, and we'll go with that. So that's it. So I'm going to do is share the screen, pull up this PowerPoint, get up there. There we go. As I said 1,000 times to you already, it's I think 120 something slides here. I'm not going to go through every slide. It's just not necessary. I'm going to skip around a little bit. Stay with me. And what I'm really trying to do is just kind of sow, SOW, seeds between your ears about how to think about policy formulation insofar as how you see how you've answered those discussion questions, which I have found the responses to be kind of interesting, as a matter of fact. Surprised me a little bit in a good way, but it was interesting about some of the spins some of you took on this. That's another conversation. So let's go. I don't think I've done this with you, but this particular slide. It's really the very first slide on the presentation. And remember, you have this presentation. Here it goes. So the question is, the first question is how you view the future. Well, it's two questions. How you view the future. If you're Michelle, or if you are Joseph, if you are Erica, and those are just the first three names I can remember. Forgive me if I left you out. How do you view the future? Folks don't really think about that too often. I know I didn't. And I have a lot in the last several years, but I have to tell you, I don't think I thought about what I thought about future other than Star Trek, Star Wars kinds of things. It's much more complex than that. But the other part of it is, now this is the important piece, and that's what's going to be the discussion question. I just thought of that. So the discussion question will be how you compare how you believe the place in which you work, your district, your school, collectively views the future. Got Walgreens calling me, it's a pain in the neck. How they collectively view the future versus how you view the future. My guess is that you probably don't think the same way the group does. And that would be interesting to see. Here we go. So how do you view the future? Do you view it as a winding highway? Now, since Beloit physically is just off Southern State Parkway, off I think exit 17. There's actually two exits you can get off on, if I remember correctly. I know none of us specifically physically go there very often nowadays, but there were times, and there will be times when you have to get there. I don't know where any of you live. I know a couple of you live in Westchester, so I don't think that Maxine is coming in all that often to Malloy. But most of you, I'm going to guess, live in the city, New York City, or in Nassau County, perhaps in Suffolk County as well. And that brings me back to Southern State Parkway. If I had a penny for every time I've driven Southern State Parkway in my lifetime, I would have a villa in Tuscany. it kind of interests me lots of ways. Now, this is a negative thing to say. You might or might not know that Southern State Parkway is rated as one of the most dangerous parkways in the country. There's routinely terrible accidents, especially on the weekend, and lots of traffic deaths on Southern State Parkway. And the reason for that, there's lots of reasons for it, but one reason is the way it's designed. It winds around. You don't necessarily see the curve, know what's coming out in front of you, and it goes up and down hills. There's a hill, if you're coming west from, let's say, Valley Stream, and you're heading up towards Rockville Center. I want to say it's exit 17. It could be that. That's Peninsula Boulevard. I think maybe it's the one after that. Where you get on the road and you're on Southern State and you go up the hill before you come back down to get down to the next exit. And it's happened to me a couple of times across my driving career where I either wasn't paying attention or took for granted that what the traffic was like. And you got to the top of the hill. As you get to the top and start to come down the other way, suddenly there are red lights in your face, brake lights all ablazing because there's some kind of stoppage. And you're standing on the car's brakes to stop it in the hope that you won't hit someone else or another car. That's what a winding highway does. It takes you. You only have that path to follow. And you don't necessarily know where that goes. Now, which brings you over to the next analogy, which is how do you view the future? And do you think of the future as a great roller coaster on an endless night? Now, the best example of that I can give you, and I think I told you once before that I am a Disney World, especially idiot savant. I know things about Disney World that Disney didn't know about Disney World. Been fascinated by the systems issues associated with Disney, as well as the entertainment value. But certainly, I get very interested in all of the things that they do to make Disney be Disney World be Disney World. And you know that one of the oldest and most popular attractions in the Magic Kingdom specifically is Space Mountain. I'll tell you a secret, I've only gone on it once because I'm not a great roller coaster guy. But those of you who've been on Space Mountain or know of it, you know that it's a roller coaster. It's supposedly through space. It's not really through space. And it's dark. You're on a little wooden track. You're on a little track, and here you are zipping around, theoretically through space. And it's taking you. You have no control over that fixed track. You've chosen to get on it, and it's taking you where it's going to go. Is that how you see the future? When someone says to you, "Well, it was meant to be," to which I typically say, but under my breath, "Poppycock." It's not meant to be. Maybe sometimes, but very rarely if you really sit back to calculate it. But it's a metaphor for how people view the future. And so if we're talking about how you view, do you think of the future as a winding highway or a Space Mountain? Do you think of it as a mighty river? Now, I was watching Quantum Leap last week, and they were talking about the future as a river. And I don't know if any of you watch Quantum Leap, the newest series, not the old ones with they were about 15, 20 years ago, though they were really, really good. It's an extension of that. They used the metaphor of mighty river. So you're on a river, and the river's going from north to south, east to west, to left and right, and its current's taking your boat where it's going to go. You get in the river. By the way, the Indians, I think the Native Americans said this, that if you put a stick in a river, that the water is never the same. Wherever that stick is stuck in the water, since the river is moving, the water is moving, it's never the same thing. The present is never the same. It's constantly changing. But to come back to this metaphor, the mighty rivers suggest that you can navigate it to some extent. If you ever read Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, those kinds of riverboat, I doubt very many people read those books nowadays, but there are certainly American classics, and they talk about how to navigate the Mississippi River, for example, which was a pretty treacherous place to navigate because of the muddy sandbars you can't see and the branches falling in there and so forth. So the pilot has to, get around those things to safely get to the destination. So there's a certain amount of individual control over how you mean to handle that. Now, to extend that point, you think of it as the future. Do you think of the future as a great ocean? Not too many people take ocean liners. I know people take cruises, but I'm thinking of some like the Queen Elizabeth with the ocean liner that would take you from New York to England. But so I'll use that as not that I ever took that boat. Uh, but in any case, the premise is that, yeah, you can take your ocean liner, your ship, uh, across the ocean blue in 1492 kind of thing, and you can navigate it by the stars. You can keep your eyes out for hazards, especially if you're up north and witness the Titanic movie as an example of watch out for the icebergs. You can have your radios tuned to the uh, weather. So if you know there's a storm coming your way, you can, to some extent, navigate away from it. So you can pretty much chart your course, mindful of the pitfalls and obstructions that might be out there to get you to your destination on your wits, more than not. So you can see how this is graduating. By the way, that's the future I espouse. Okay. I certainly don't espouse it as entirely random. There are circumstances that create the things that create it. And since I'm an old social studies teacher, that's why people need to learn history, because there are certain patterns in history that continue to repeat themselves. And there's a famous saying about those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And there's a lot to be said about that. And it's 2 years, a little more than 2 years since the Russians invaded the Ukraine, as a terrible but actual reality-based example. And that's really based on historical needs as much as ideological needs. I mean, traditionally, the Russians have always been worried about Eastern Europe not being a cushion to protect Russia from invasion from the Western European countries. And Ukraine is kind of caught in the middle of that. I'm not excusing the Russians for this, not at all, not at all. But that kind of gives you some kind of explanation of how events unfold. Elections are like that too, for that matter. So if you think the future is entirely a dice game, I'm not sure if I embrace that, but I could see that. Or do you have another metaphor for this? Now, what you need to do, and this is where the decision question is going to be, and you got to think about this for a minute. This kind of goes back to the survey I gave you a couple of weeks ago. What's your viewpoint of the future? What is your colleagues or your staff's viewpoint of the future? Maybe that means. My experience is, and I haven't got any research to prove this. I should probably do a dissertation or some research on this. If anybody would like to do a study like that, give me a call. We'll talk about it. My experience is that teachers, I'm not sure about leaders, educational leaders, teachers are typically passive. I'm going to use the word victims, which is a strong word to use. Typically passive and will feel as though they have very little control over what they can do. Especially in this day and age when teachers are being attacked for all sorts of things. Okay. So if there's a need for a change or a need for a policy to enforce something that's relatively new, like we talked about the DEI premise, or several of you spoke about cell phone policies and so on. are teachers passive victims to people making decisions for them, and therefore the future is more nearly like, I don't know, Space Mountain? Think about that, and we'll come back to that. That's the discussion question. I'll frame it better for you up the road. All right, so that's slide number one in this particular presentation, and I have no intention to take you through everything else. What I'm going to do now is do a lot of zipping in. I'm just going to show you some words along the way. One word is emerging future. I often call emerging future the probable futures. Most everything is possible. Fewer things are probable. But you can't be probable unless you're within the possible pot to begin with. We'll skip that one for now. And I think I may have mentioned this to you. I like this quote. It's not mine. It's a person named Richardson quoted it. When it comes to the future, there are three kinds of people: those who let it happen, those who make it happen, those who wonder what happened. Those are the scary ones. And the question now becomes, what do you believe? What do your teachers in your community believe? I'm going to skip these words, but we're going to come back to those. I don't know about this course necessarily needs to speak to that, but I would love to spend a lot of time talking about. All right, we'll skip some of this now. And then this title is actually taken from an old comic strip with a certain license that I took. And so if you read what this says, I think it's got a lot. It says more than it probably appears to say. And we have met the future, emerging future, and it is us. One of my friends, when I was working in K-12 world, had a saying, a decision delayed is a decision made. And he was absolutely right. So we have the Met. Look at that. I just caught that after about, how long did I miss that? We have met the future. And it is us, as we are the sum of our future beliefs, and the actions that go with it. I don't know if that scares you. It kind of scares me a little bit. Now we're going to skip a lot of this. Though I'm personally terribly interested in it, I also know that everybody shares the same interest. So I don't think it's really technically part of what this course particularly should be about, except insofar as formulating good policy. All right, so I'm going to, oh boy, I want to talk about these things, but I will save these for a rainy day if I need to come back to them. You could take a crack at taking a look at some of this. It'll make more sense than you think. Now, if you believe that no one can predict the future, you're right. Predict is a terrible verb when it comes to the future. My wife every so often watches the Long Island Medium. I hope not too many of you watch it, but my wife does watch it. And sometimes I watch it with her. And she's claims that she's got the powers to converse with dead people, I guess the only way to put it. And she sounds a little scary because sometimes it seems like she's pretty much spot on, but you can question that any way you want. But in the end, she's talking about supposedly predicting. Here's a prediction. The stock market will go down tomorrow by 3 points. Maybe it will, but that's so specific that if it goes down by 4%, it goes up by 3%, then the prediction is wrong. Now, if you watch, as I'm prone to do, you watch the weather reports each day. They'll tell you there's a 50% chance of a forecast of rain because they're giving themselves a wiggle room here. They're not going to say, "Oh, this is absolutely going to happen tomorrow." Or at 3 o'clock, this kind of thing. But they will say, yeah, the percentages are good or not good for that to happen. That's forecasting. Hello, you can forecast the future. It is not a psychic talent. It is not a specific, skill that only certain people can have, although there are people who call themselves futurists. I like to call myself an edu-futurist, although I have no right to call myself that. I just think that I'm working on becoming one, and enough said. And so, yes, you can. I believe, and there's plenty of research to show that you can forecast the future. And that goes back to two skills I'm going to show you right now. These skills are connected back to last month's agenda, and I believe have bearing on your policy brief that you're developing. Two reasons why I'm showing you that. Here we go. I've shown you this slide 2 or 3 times already. This is a simple model of futuring. I'm sorry, of decision making. And you can see that we've talked about it enough time. I'm not going to repeat it. It's pretty much self-explanatory, but you'll notice here in the center is that word, that futuring word, where you are using forecasting skills to figure out what's probably most likely going to happen, and then your values pick the course of action you choose to take. I'm not sure how many of you watched the movie Oppenheimer. I watched it last week. Wasn't crazy about it, but I thought historically it caught pretty historically accurately, the dilemma that the scientists who were developing the atomic bomb were using and were having, as well as the military and the civil leaders, the president and his cabinet and so forth, were struggling about whether they should use it or not because they knew of the terrible destruction it would bring about. So that was pretty accurate, and you can see that actually some of the choices that laid out were very, very interesting if you think about it. Because there are people even now will say shouldn't have done it until I'm not going to get into the history of it, but it's not. It has so much to do with your values, the values and feelings of the times. Looking back on it over close to 80 years ago, it's a heck of a lot different than looking at it now. So we talked about this, and I just wanted to point out that, in my view, and my book speaks to this, books speak to this, there's 5 forms of futuring, 5 forms of forecasting. And I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to show you the first 2. And you'll see how they fit perfectly with your policy brief, just conversations. I promise, as soon as I find it. There's that forecasting word. All right, so first one, this is the one everyone understands. And if you go back to the model of decision making at slide 52, you'll see that off on that left-hand side is facts, data, information. We make bad decisions if we don't have all the facts. I don't know how many of you remember. Some of you wouldn't because you were too young, but most of you, I think, will remember when we decided to invade Iraq. And it was right after 9/11. We were looking for a way to squash terrorism wherever we thought it might exist, according to the president. And he sold a bill of goods to the American people that said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. And we needed to get rid of those weapons of mass destruction by invading them and getting rid of Saddam Hussein. What happened was there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. There's still ways to look at it. Either he had faulty information, 3 ways. He didn't have any information, or he lied. I don't think he lied. I think he really thought. I think that he thought that. I don't know that for a fact. But at any rate, this is about getting all the information you need to know. So if we're talking about futures issues that you can see happening in your school district, I'll use and I don't want to cast it as a problem with a capital P. I don't see it as a problem. But it is a theme, an issue, and we talked about it a couple of times already. And several of you being E&L teachers and directors, if I'm not mistaken, understand what I'm driving at. The matters of demographic changes is a trend that continues. It's a forecasting that the population will change. The nature of the population we're going to be teaching will be different than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, probably. And so the quicker we understand what that's about and why it is, uh, and the issues that it brings along with it, the challenges it brings to a school district, to do the right thing by not only those kids, the new kids from other countries to us, but also the kids who are here too, who don't want to suffer for the fact that they're being overlooked for their needs of the new kids. And that's not a knock on those new kids, not at all. Not at all. It's just a matter of us understanding how we can make this right for everybody, and the word being equity as such. And so you have to gather information, as much information as you can. A good policy always begins with information. An issue seems to kick up. We'll talk more about this in the next video. An issue seems to kick up, and then you need to know more about it as such. And so a good futurist chart information. And there's lots of ways to do these. Are just some of the ways. I'm going to demonstrate those two in yellow in another video, but not today. I'm going to demonstrate SWOT, and I'm going to demonstrate root cause. So they're both in this slide presentation. If you're interested in knowing more about them before I get you to it, you'll find some information here. And I believe it might even be in the policy book. No, it's not. I don't think it is. And so these are just some of the ways you can gather information. They're all obvious enough. So I'm not going to read them all back at you. How do you get all the information you need to study the issue you're studying? And you can just read these yourself to see what they may be. But I just wanted to show you this one forecasting technique. It's called trend. Here's a fancy word: trend extrapolation, which is a fancy futurist word for trend direction. I belong to a decision-making group online, and would love to talk to you some more about it. And they kept asking the people who belong to these groups, what would the percentage be Nikki Haley's vote yesterday in South Carolina? So I kept saying better than 50%. I think I probably was the only person in the country who was saying better than 50%. But I will tell you that I was somewhat surprised that she got more than 40. So I think she got 40, actually. So that's a trend that could mean something, might mean nothing. But when you take a look at graphs, these trend graphs, a demographic trend, or they had an achievement score thing, and so on. They're great for showing you the past and for showing you the present in terms of direction, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the direction you think the trend indicates will be where that data will go. I hope I don't disturb anyone with what I'm about to say, but I can't think of a better example, so I'm going to use it with my apologies if you disagree with me. I'm not trying to offend anybody at all. And so, yeah, okay, so the demographic trend seems to be increased numbers of immigrants, illegal immigrants. And so one solution we remember from 4 years ago, more than that now, was a wall. If you put a wall up, you would stop immigration or slow it down. I don't know. I'm not lying to you. I don't know whether it slowed immigration down. I don't think it did. I could be wrong about that. But that was the solution. So that graph trend line would have gone down rather than continuing to go up. So there would be a decision that was made by the government to, if there was a decision that made uniformly put a wall across all of our boundaries, our southern boundaries, that would stop the immigration flow. Is a possibility of a future as such. So trend extrapolation is the only one I'm going to show you, but you should pay attention to the other one because all of those ideas can be used in your policy brief conversation. I'm going going to skip. Now, I'm not going to do SWOT and root cause today. I'm going to give it to, I'll come back to that in a couple of days because they deserve a lot more love, even though there's plenty of explanation of it here. So that's type 1. Then there's type 2. Okay. I was going to do this with you last week or 2 weeks ago, and then time ran out. So I'm going to show it to you. And maybe I'll try to squeeze it into the next. I think I will try to get it into the actually practicing it at the next meeting in a couple of weeks. And it's a two-dimensional, what I call a two-dimensional approach, fairly superficial, but nonetheless important. That progresses from all the information people have. They've talked about it, they've twisted it, they've turned it, they've pulled it apart, they've bounced it off each other. And then I think they know what's going on about the issue they're talking about. They probably don't altogether know. There's a saying, I may have used it before, that speaks to what you know, what you don't know, what you don't know that you don't know. That's the one that throws people. What is it? How we don't know that we don't know that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Is a way to look as an example of that, as such. And so we're talking about, in this case, what I call two-dimensional cause and effect forecasting. And you're going to see two examples of it. Now you'll see here, I'm not going to bring this up, but if you really want to know more about futures wheels, you need to know this website anyway. If you don't know this website, by heavens, you should. It's called mindtools.com. If I'm not mistaken, they're starting to charge money for using some of their materials. So I'm not telling you to enroll in it or to subscribe to it, because there's plenty of free materials that come with it. But it's an invaluable website for all kinds of thinking devices, for forecasting devices, and graphic organizers of how to approach issues. It's really very well done. I just don't want to take the time to show it to you this minute. Maybe we'll take the time up the road. And what you're going to do with a futures wheel is chart possible, probable, and preferable futures. The 3 Ps. Possible, probable, and preferable. Most anything is possible. It is possible that pigs will fly. It's possible that the Martians will land tomorrow. If you watch some of those silly shows on History Channel, and I do, when they alien encounters or UFOs, and they say, is it possible that UFOs, aliens and UFOs have purple eyes? Yeah, it's possible. But it's not. We don't even know if there are aliens with eyes at all. But if you use the word possible, you're really leaving it pretty wide open. So yes, it's possible. Everything is possible, but fewer things are probable. That's where you've got to put your money. Not even to the preferable, to the probable. What will likely happen if I sift, weigh, assess, distill all the information in front of me? And it goes back to the policy formulation premise. Okay? So in a futures wheel, what you're going to do is narrow from possible to probable and maybe to preferable, but we won't get into that quite yet. That's a futures wheel. Now, a futures wheel is, I use the metaphor of a pond. When you throw a rock in the middle of a pond, the typical question is, what will happen? Well, since you're not here to answer it, I'm answering it for you and telling you it will cause a ripple. The ripples will go out to the edges of the pond and sometimes bounce back and come again. All right, as simple as that. If somebody punches me in the nose, my nose will bleed. If, then. Hear that. If, then. And so what you do is you put a future in the center. So whatever, let's say you're thinking about a policy that's going to ban cell phones. I don't know how you get, I'm laughing because I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying you're thinking about doing something like that. I think Maxine said that's what they did in her school district, if I remember right. That's the center future. This one I made up was called Demographic Shifts Point to Widening Gaps in Achievement. That's the future. That's the punch in the nose. That's the rock in the middle. And then the next question is, what are the ripple effects? Now, all I did was give you a couple, but you can see how this works. So this is actually a little bit misleading, but I'll go with it for the moment. So now the future changes because children will have difficult, well, that's not the same thing. Let me go back to this one. So I'm just going to do model one for you. So if we think that there are demographic point shifts are going to widen the gaps in achievement, one possible effect of that would be student dropouts. Students drop out. Now, here's the point. Now it goes to this point here. Watch my cursor, where now you see, well, what's the effect of the effect? Of the effect of the effect of the effect. You can get a little crazy with this if you want, but to keep it simple for us right now, what would be a natural consequence of kids dropping out? Suppose another future was efforts by the school district to go with homogeneous classes. Making a face, I don't like that one, but it's a possibility. It's probably a probability in some class. I think I've seen it in some places where it wound up being what they do. And that's when I took my shoe off it and threw it at them. But kids, all ENL kids are isolated in one classroom, or in one wing. I saw that once. Holy heavens! And so, if we were going to isolate all the ENL kids over here and keep the Gen Ed kids over here, and then what would be the effect of that? So what are the futures that evolve from the immediate futures? It's called, the fancy word is called primary, secondary, and tertiary consequences, but you don't have to worry about that. And play with this as you're doing some of your formulation for the next assignment. All right, so I'm going to skip some of this. So this will tell you how to do it. And then we're going to go to something that extends from futures wheel, and that's called a fancy word again. Ready? Cross impact matrix. Well, in fact, I'm going to change this word right now. I can do that because it's my power. And we're going to call that, you ready? Chart. It's a chart. A matrix is a chart. Spelled correctly. All right, so now what a cross impact chart will do is it's kind of interesting, actually. It'll take those ideas you had identified in the futures wheel. And what I always say, okay, now tell me what based on your information gathering, tell me what you think is probably going to happen. And they'll say, well, we're going to segregate the kids. We're going to have to get more tax money together to pay for extra services. And those are just two ideas, typical futures that typically would emerge. All right. Well, how does that impact other variables, other themes within this? And you'll see how this would work here. So what we did was show you one future. Teachers need more training. Well, what extends from that? Then effective systems must be identified and adopted, and so forth. I'm not going to read this to you. So what you're doing is saying, well, how will that affect the community? How will that affect administrators, teachers, special education students? And then what you do is you speculate based on your information gathering. Not just going to pull it out of the air. Based on your information gathering, you speculate on what that chart will begin to look like. Here's another example. What you ordinarily could do is put down from your futures wheel, you put down what you think your probable futures are, and then what you think will be affected one way or another, positively or negatively. And typically, these are the ones I use: students, parents, teachers, and community. Sometimes I give that a separate column by itself. And how will that affect shared vision? You can see I modeled some premises behind that. And this will tell you how to do it. And this will tell you how to do it. We'll stop there. Okay. So what I've shown you is two segments of forecasting. The first segment was information gathering. The second segment was what I call two-dimensional futuring. I'm not taking you to three-dimensional, not yet anyway, certainly not now. So what we're doing is offering this to you and you'll probably use it in our class one way or another. It could probably make a great discussion question too, but I won't do that to you this particular week coming up as such, because you're working on this assignment. So that's the end of this video. Okay. I tried to make sure I got closed caption on this too, but I don't know if I got it. So I'll find out in a minute, or actually more than a minute, because I thought that would be helpful for all of you as well, instead of listening to me yap, yap, yap. Enough said. So what I'm going to do now is stop the share. Wish you the rest of the Sunday to be a nice one, a little chilly out, but at least it's sunny. And tomorrow, I think, is going to be actually warm. Maybe Bernardo can go hit some golf balls.